Good morning and welcome to the Veterans Forum. We're coming to you from the studios of the Bedford Community Television here in Bedford, New Hampshire. Today is the 24th of January 2013. My name is Bob Stevens, and I've had the honor and the privilege of conducting these interviews since 2004. The program is a joint effort, if you will, with the Library of Congress and stations such as this and all other community stations throughout the country, where we're asking each and every guy and gal who served anywhere in any of the wars, if they can and will share those experiences with us in this recorded interview. The end result will be filed down at the Library of Congress's database, and from here on out that'll be public information. The program is basically to try and record history that was made by the people who made it, if you will. Each one of us had a job to do, and hopefully most of us did it. Some were very scary, some were funny, some were mundane, but the bottom line, each and every one of us contributed whatever we had to do, wherever. Now, as an example of how important this is, way back when I was given a statistic that during World War II, as an example, there were some 16 million guys and gals serving throughout the world in all kinds of activities and locales. About 3 years ago, we got an update statistically. At that time, they thought there was anywhere from 1.5 to maybe 2 million of those guys and gals left. The others had long gone to their rest. We're fighting the clock and the calendar. One of the problems a lot of people have is they say, oh, I did nothing spectacular. I wasn't a hero. You don't have to be an Audie Murphy, if you will, or something like that. The simple line is you had a job to do and you did it, and we're trying to add that to the puzzle, if you will. Our history is a great big puzzle, and each one of us is a piece in that puzzle. We're trying to make sure that we can fill as many of the blanks so that the history that's recorded will in fact be the correct history and not something that maybe was manufactured or glossed over. At the end of the program, you'll see a little address where you can get a hold of me or the station here. And if you're so interested, and we hope you will be, this is our first program from this station, come and see us. We'll do all we can to make it worth your while, but more important as you get to be an older guy, and the grandkids say, hey, Grandpa, what did you do in the war? Well, first off, at our age, you have to figure what war are they talking about? World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm, you name it. And once you've done that, and do, if you will, get rid of some of that baggage, one of the things that I've found almost every interview, and this will be the, I think, 101, 102 that I've done, when the guys and gals are through, they say, whew, I'm glad I did that. I got rid of a lot of baggage that, for whatever reason, you've been hanging on to for years. We need your help. Spread the word to any and all the guys and gals, family members or whatever. If they are and capable of coming and sharing that, please, let's do it. Because once they're gone, it's a blank after that. Not being macabre, but we are fighting the calendar and the clock. Okay? Today is another good example of what has happened way back when that we want to bring back up to date again. Bernie's volunteered to come and do a program with it. What we'll do is I'll ask him to introduce himself, ask a few basic questions, and then it's his show. Pay attention because it's something you'll be very proud to have seen. Bernie, my boy, if you will, tell us your whole name, you spell your last name for the record. Where do you now live, for example?
Well, my name is Bernard. They all call me Bernie.
Of course, the
last name Ruchin, R-U-C-H-I-N. For the record. I'm a resident of Bedford, live just a few miles down the road here, been here for 33 years. Great town, great people, great state.
Amen. And what was your branch of service and service dates?
United States Marine Corps. I go back to World War II, your generation also.
Don't be nasty.
And I got called back for the Korean War. So my service dates run from 1943. I did a 4-year hitch as a regular Marine, come out of the Marine Corps free and clear, and joined the reserves, not knowing what I would face at some point. And in 1950, the Korean War erupted, and I was called up as a reservist, active duty. Given 8 days' notice to report for duty at Brooklyn Navy Yard, back in New York State. And long story short, 2 months I'm in Korea. And I'm saying, this ain't looking good. But I volunteered. I'm proud of what I did. I served with great Marines, great humans that come to be closer than family in many cases. And the worst part about serving in a combat situation is losing somebody that you were quite close to.
Yeah.
And it's something that stays with you, the memory, everlasting. That's basically my service as a Marine.
Okay, not too shabby.
Well, I just did my job. I'm not a war hero. Don't get me into that category, because I've seen heroes. I've seen guys do things that were extraordinary. Three Marines on Saipan, one of the battles I was in, leaped on grenades. They were killed, but to save
somebody else.
So, and the Marines of today, and also soldiers in the combat environment, perform miraculously,
Right.
and I give them a lot of credit under a very difficult engagement that they're given, the rules of engagement,
Amen.
watered down. In my time, kill them all, let God sort them out.
Yeah.
Today, they got to ask, Mother, may I?
Yeah.
And that's
Don't
wrong.
shoot till you're shot.
Right.
Okay. Now, that takes care of where we are right now, but I'd like to go back and build a history, something like This Is Your Life. For example, can you tell us where and when were you born, and how was your early childhood growing up during the Depression? Any good memories, bad memories, or things that happened that you'd like to share?
The events that I was born into, being born in 1924, gave me a path directly in line with World War II, Korea, the things I experienced. And as you may know, because we were the same age, pretty much the same environment we experienced in life, the Depression came along. And both you and I experienced the two most catastrophic events of the 20th century, the Great Depression and World War II. Now, the Great Depression, in the early years of my life, probably up until the 30s, don't have any recollection of being good or bad or otherwise, but along came the Depression, no work for the average male income producer. There were no food stamps, no welfare, no Section 8 housing, nothing that is available today to help people live some part
Overcome the
of a
bumps,
decent
yeah.
life. So you didn't know the pain until you leave that environment, and then look back on it in retrospect and say, they were tough times. And we were poor. We were dirt poor. Lived on Long Island, New York.
Is that where you were born?
Born in Long Island.
Okay, you didn't tell us that.
Lived in an area where they had the potato farms. That was our main source of food. Potatoes for breakfast, potatoes for dinner, potatoes for supper. Mom had ways of fixing them up, disguising them.
Magic.
Both of my parents were immigrants. Came to this country just with the clothes on their back, nothing, no money, no nothing, and wanted to become Americans right away. And of course, when the Depression hit, it propelled us into a life of poverty. And of course, being young as I was, this is prior to World War II, in school, you wore hand-me-down clothes, kids made fun of you. The shoes I wore were too tight, they had holes in the soles. We put cardboard in to prevent our feet hitting the ground. If it rained, we just changed the cardboard. We'd have cardboard in our pockets. It was miserable. But again, not feeling the pain of it all until I left that whole environment, years later.
You didn't know how good you had it, huh?
And say, that's right.
Yeah.
And of course, when the war came along, there were jobs that were created. And of course, I went off into the Marine Corps. And the story that I can tell you, there's so many stories that come to mind about that time in my life. And
well, let me interrupt a second. Did you have any brothers or sisters, or were you an only child? And,
I had a brother.
How was your life growing up in comparison with them and help each other?
My sister was born in 1939. My brother was born in the 20s, as I was, and we were sort of, we grew up together. He was younger than I. And Mom was a taskmaster. She was a disciplinarian. You can imagine being of the Catholic faith, when Lent comes, we're giving up something in food. We had no food to eat to begin with.
You didn't have too hard a decision then, huh?
But they were tough years. Now, of course, the poverty that we were living in determined, you know, our style of life, which was rather mundane. But we were a family. We stuck together, and Mom did a great job on providing for us as best she could.
Yeah.
So it was sacrifice, which is part of what we Marines do in our whole operational methods. Discipline, sacrifice, learn how to self-motivate, and prepared me pretty much for the years ahead that I'd face.
Well, how about schooling? How far through schooling? High school graduate,
Well,
intermediate, Gary?
when the war came along, I was in school, obviously. And of course, all my buddies want to go in the military, mostly Navy. I was 17 years old, and Mom wouldn't sign until I finished high school. She was adamant about that, and of course, I couldn't go anywhere. I tried to lie about my age. It didn't work very well. But nonetheless, I did finish school, just about barely made it. And I turned 18 at that time, so I did need her signature. But I still stayed in school and got that diploma, which to this day, I bless her for that decision.
Amen. Oh, yeah.
And without that diploma, looking ahead in time, what it meant to get a job, that's something I would need. So it did help me. But the times that I came in and actually get in the Marine Corps, first it was the Navy. All my buddies were in the Navy. And of course you gravitate toward them, you hang with them, and you have a general concept of what we want to do as Americans. And of course when the Japs attacked Pearl Harbor, we didn't know what Pearl Harbor was. We were living a sort of a mundane life. There was no newspapers that we could read. The radio was the communication, method that we learned of what went on in life. And of course, when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor and created the mayhem, and what enraged me mostly about that act was that the Jap flyers flew over Honolulu and machine gunned civilians in private cars, killed them. It wasn't a military area to contend. It was outside of Pearl. And of course that inflamed me and inflamed my buddies. And the thing was, we want to go out and kill Japs.
Yeah.
Simply as that. So they went to the Navy, a lot of my good, close friends, and of course I had to wait till I finished school. And we used to sneak into the movies. Movies were 10 cents to see a matinee, and we devised a way to get into the back door when the movies were starting to operate. We'd have somebody sneak in, we'd come in. I think the manager knew it, but they gave us a free pass. So I'm sitting in this theater one day, and watching the film. It was called Wake Island, which was the actual battle in the Pacific. And the film presented itself as the battle, the Japanese were attacking them, and there was a Marine major on Wake communicating with the command in Hawaii. And they were going back and forth about replacements, supplies. That's Marine major talking to this individual in Hawaii. The Hawaii comes back and said, well, what is your situation? What is your condition? And this Marine major said, condition perilous, condition grave, send more Japs. Well, I'm sitting there.
What the heck?
What is he thinking of? Send more Japs. It's like I think of Japs, you know, Marines. Who are these soldiers that talk like sailors, that fight like wildcats? I'm looking at the Marines. Maybe that's what I want to do, to get me over there quicker. So I started to do a search as best I could to find out who they were. And of course, the more I learned about them, the more it drove me to that whole concept of becoming a Marine. So I go home and announce to Mom one day, the Navy, she was comfortable with the Navy. Figured, you know, she'd keep an eye on me because the Navy facility was not that far away.
When you're going to be stationed close to home.
Close to home, she could sort of monitor me. Well, I came home that one afternoon, I said, Mom, I'm going to join the Marines. Oh, she says. But I prevailed and enlisted, of course, in 1943. And of course, I can reflect on the first getting in the Marine Corps, enlisted out of New York City. I lived on Long Island. We'd take a train to New York. Gas rationing was enforced. You couldn't, there was no cars to drive, no gasoline. So transportation was primarily railroad. So I took that train, and of course, the Marine Corps, for some reason, operates under cover of darkness. Whenever you do anything, it's before daylight. Left the house at 0300, got aboard the train, got into New York City to be sworn in for further transfer down to Paris Island.
Any particular spot where you were sworn in as a gathering spot for all these?
It was the Marine Corps recruiting station. I think it might have been Church Street. It's been a long time, Bob, and the memory does fade. But it was in New York City. We were given orders, cut orders. There were 6 of us. Cut orders to go down to Washington, D.C., pick up a Pullman for the rest of the trip down to Paris Island, South Carolina. We left New York City about 1600, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, got down to D.C. to get this Pullman, which is a sleeping car. No such thing. We got aboard this Atlantic coastline cattle car, had wooden seats, no windows. The old engines were, you know, coal-burning engines, the smoke, you know, blowing out. We left Washington, D.C. probably maybe 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock that night. Had nothing to eat.
Oh, that's going to ask. No chow?
No chow, nothing. Got aboard that train. It took us one day to get from D.C.
down to P.I.?
To South Carolina, Paris Island. No bathroom facilities, nothing to eat, nothing to drink. We just sat there in those wooden seats. And the train would go around a bend and all the smoke would come in. Yeah. Mom had fixed me a nice shirt to wear, white shirt. It was black from the soot. When we get down to Paris Island, South Carolina, it might have been Beaufort. Mm-hmm. And what we did, we got down to this station, like a building to the right side, I remember. Train stops. On board comes a Marine corporal in khakis and said, anybody who's reporting for recruit training, follow me, get off the train. I'm going to take you down and get you something to eat, which he did. We walked across that track into this little restaurant. We got fed, take whatever you want. Went back to this other building on the opposite side of the track and hit the sack that night. Got up next morning, and he was treating us with great respect, and we're saying, this is what we
This is a mousetrap.
this is what they were told about the so-called brutality down there. Well, we hadn't been to PI yet. We get up next morning, make a long story short, get fed, puts us on a bus, wishes us well, shakes our hand, off we go to the main base. We hit the main gate. The bus stops, On board comes another corporal in khaki. And I see all you people reporting for recruit training, exit the bus right now, move out. The guy in front of me sitting next to the exit going down the bus, I'm sitting behind him, he gets up and he starts to straighten his pants out. And this Marine, look, I'm looking at this Marine. And this Marine's neck is getting red to purple. He grabs this guy by the hair, spins him around, kicks him off the bus. And he says, when I say move out, I mean move out. That's it, we're here. From that moment on, it was, you know, a lot of hands-on treatment. It was tough, but it wasn't anywhere as tough as they could destroy my motivation, my spirit to get what I wanted to do. And we left there after our training, mostly with weapons.
How many weeks?
I'm trying to think back, was it 8 weeks, was it 10 weeks? I really don't remember, but somewhere's in that time frame. We leave there in the dead of night again, you know, get aboard a cattle car on a troop train to North Carolina for further training. And we get our emblem, you know, there was no real parade, no ceremony. When we left Paris Island, it was not like it is today. We just left. We get to Camp Lejeune, they call it New River at that time, and we debark the train. We line up along the area outside where the station was. Along comes a big, tall gunnery sergeant.
Your mother.
And he says, "You people think you're Marines yet?" Not a chance. "You'll be a Marine," he says, "if you leave here alive." So we're saying, we just left all this horror. And here we are back again. But it was a concept of, you know, confusion, a lot of things that were to prepare you for what you were about to face in combat. Because as you know, combat is confusion. There's a lot of things that you see that is traumatic. They try to explain to you what to expect, but it doesn't sink in until you're actually there.
You're there. Right.
And
you got to drink from that well.
It is. It's something that to this day you look back and say, how did I survive all that stuff? Yeah. But you know, it's a challenge that our generation was given. We faced it, we dealt with it. Been a lot of comparison between Pearl Harbor and 9/11. Not even close. As you remember, as I do, we as a nation rose up as a society.
It was United States.
Right. And the rationing came along. It was sacrificed by all, not just a small segment of society. Tragedy at 9/11, absolutely, you know, all that death and destruction, as was at Pearl Harbor. But there's no comparison in my mind as to which one was greater, because the greater results, the adverse results, were from the Pearl Harbor incident. Mm-hmm. It affected us all of us. Changed the whole way. It changed the course of my life. I don't know where I would have gone from that point had there not been a World War II, but it propelled me to the life I have now.
Just as a vignette, if you will, anything outstanding in your time in boot before you got your...
Well, no, the
Did
Marine
you feel
Corps,
like you're being persecuted, put on, or you're going to do it in spite of them?
Well, the training in boot camp was to indoctrinate you into the psyche, what a Marine is. Of course, the close order drill is the basic thing. But the main thing that the Marine Corps taught us as Marines was weapons. You spent half your time in boot camp with weapons, and you furthered that at Camp Lejeune, on New River. Mm-hmm. So it was basic. Every Marine is a rifleman, from the commandant on down to the private.
Yeah.
He can pick up a weapon, and they taught us to pick up the enemy's weapons, to utilize them in the case that you somehow lost yours or was destroyed, whatever.
Oh,
so
yeah.
you can function on the battlefield. So weapons were a basic tool, and of course our classification is rifleman. You may be a cook and baker or a motor transport, but you are a rifleman. That's simple as that. And things that the boot camp experience, it was tough, you know, hands-on, the brutality, which doesn't exist today, but they were the times. And you...
Did you ever suffer any, I'll call it the Hollywood DI stuff?
No, you swore you were going to kill the DI at some point later down the road. But you know, after you leave that environment and you think back of what they tried to do for you, you applaud that. Yeah. You admire them. And
a lot of guys have told me that they had the experience of being completely torn apart and then slowly reassembled into what now becomes a Marine.
They disassemble you.
Yeah, and put the pieces the way they want.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's true, because a lot of terms they use, derogatory, you know, a lot of vile, foul language to make their point. And of course, the swagger stick was another tool that they held.
The prod.
With the 50 caliber slug on the end, they would accentuate their comments on your chest or on the side of your head. And those today would look back at our experience, say they were brutal, but it was a war.
They were.
It was combat.
They were.
And what the enemy would do to you would be far worse than anything you ever experienced in basic training. The things that were given to us by the guys who went at the Guadalcanal before I did, you know, what the chaps did.
The atrocities.
And how they were very crafty at concealment, hide among their dead. Gave you a little heads up on this is what you got to do.
Now, we've gone, if you will, through boot and PI. Where and when did you become a member of a particular branch or division? How were you selected, volunteered, or whatever?
Well, everything in the States was training. Camp Pendleton, I left New River, went to Camp Pendleton, which is on the West Coast, California. More training and weapons, more things to prepare you for combat. And left San Diego aboard ship, sailed to Hawaii, the Big Island, where I joined the 2nd Marine Division. They just came off of Tarawa, and they were licking their wounds, you know, filling their ranks. And joined them at the Parker Ranch on the Big Island we'll call Hawaii. And then from that point, with some more additional training, you know, getting into the groove of the units that I was assigned, the rifle company. I trained in mortars in the States, in California. I got to the division, never seen another mortar. Until, if you fast forward into the Iwo Jima thing, where we were called out from Saipan to go to Iwo. They gave me this bombing coordinate back for mortars. Back to the mortars again, see? But we didn't go because they brought in the 3rd Marine Division off a floating reserve, and they were comfortable with the troops they had. So we didn't get to Iwo. And of course, the leaving Hawaii aboard a troop ship, transport ship, that's another whole story, you know, things that you, to survive that kind of an environment too. Crowded, you know, a lot of emotions, a lot of...
unhealthy living conditions.
Had 2 meals a day, by chit, you know, and of course, the first few days, some guys are sick, and you smell that puke all over, you know.
Top bunk was a Cascade.
And the troop ships, as you may know, where we were built below deck, you know, of course, I think they were about 6 high. And of course, you had to step on the lower bunks to get up to the top bunk. And if you had a lower bunk, you're getting stepped on constantly because guys trying to get up to their bunk.
Yeah. And you had a lot of
It was so
company.
tight, Bob, that you couldn't lay on your side.
Well, 18 inches.
Yeah, you had to lay on your back or your stomach.
Yeah.
And of course, being, youthful, you absorb all this stuff, you can tolerate it. I wouldn't want to go back there now. I don't think I'd survive very well. But it's something you did because we were committed, as I was, as many of my fellow Marines were, to get over there and kill these people. That's who we were. We were in the killing business. That's what you trained for.
Yeah. Now, with your first engagement, was that Saipan, or had you got something previous to that?
No, it was Saipan was the first to engage. We left Hawaii. We were training, doing beach landings, and simulating, a target area would be similar in topography, like we went to Maui, and then at sea, debarking, the cargo nets into the LCVPs. And then we left Hawaii and went over to Pearl to go into a convoy. And there's another situation that comes to mind right now that happened at Pearl Harbor called the Second Pearl Harbor. A lot of people don't know about it. It was never publicized. It was kept under wraps for all the war years. It did come out after the war, but the war's over. These things are sort of lost in the shuffle. But what happened was, before we sailed off for the Marianas to invade Saipan, Tinian, and Guam, Sunday morning, afternoon chow, when you go into Pearl Harbor, there's a place called Westlock. You go to the left before you get to the harbor. And in that Westlock area were docked LSTs, all ready for the operations in the Marianas, loaded with high-test gas, ammo, gear, so on. Sunday morning, it was in May. I was aboard APA, but not in that Westlock area. We hear these explosions, and you see smoke over to the Westlock area. What happened was an LST somehow exploded and blew up, and it caught some other LSTs.
Okay, ripple effect.
Ripple. And they're trying to get underway to get the hell out of there. 800 casualties. Equipment that we needed for the invasion of Saipan, gone. Now, the 2nd Marine Division had a general called, we call him Howland M. Smith. This guy was the guy that ran the EWO operations, too. And he was one who, take no prisoners, rough, tough, and hard to bluff, and said, we're going to go anyway. We left maybe 2 days later than scheduled, made up at sea, and the invasion took place on time. We hit Saipan on 15 June 1944.
Early morning or mid-morning?
I got in there about maybe 1700 myself, and I didn't go in the first wave.
Okay, all right.
And the way the operations are, the island hopping campaigns are, with everyone that I've been in anyway, and the ones that came before me more or less, you'd be in the invasion fleet coming in, and they would take the troop transports maybe a few miles out to avoid the shelling from the enemy. We'd debark the ship down the cargo net, into the
circle.
They just circle.
Yeah.
For maybe 3 hours to get lined up and then land a landing force. Well, your last meal aboard ship for us was steak and eggs and a shot of brandy. And of course, once you hit that landing craft, anxiety,
and everything else,
diesel smell, and the puke.
Yeah.
The guys throwing up in his shoes, and the smoke and the noise, the battle wagons are firing over your head. They're whistling through, and the word is passed to land that final wave. or the wave I was in, maybe about the 5th wave, I think it was, hit the beach about 1700. And you see all this carnage. You see dead Marines,
pieces of
equipment,
Marines.
you know, and this is when it really strikes you, you know, and your heart is pounding away. But your mission is to get inland, and the mission was, in the operations I was in, a battle plan. The 01 line, the 02 line, the 03 line. Supposed to make that mission before nightfall and get in a defensive position. And the Japs, of course, with these banzai attacks that they performed, the biggest one in World War II was on Saipan. When, at the final stage of that battle, over 3,000 came at us that night. And you couldn't load your weapon fast enough to fire at them. They'd overrun you. And what was it? K-bars.
Yeah.
Fists. Came out 0300 that morning in the final line of departure. And they were yelling. You could hear them off in the distance.
A Yankee go home.
With the broken English, you know. Tonight we drink Marine. They couldn't pronounce the letter L.
Yeah.
Our password in the line was like Lollapalooza Lou or Lily Langley. And they would say, Remy, Remy. They couldn't make that L pronounce. But they would holler, tonight we drink Marine brood. And of course, Marines, by virtue of our training, maintain fire discipline. Don't reveal your position.
Absolutely.
That night, that morning, I could hear the tanks clanging, you know, starting up more to my left flank, down toward the shoreline, Tanapag, they call it, that area. And hooting, yelling, some gunfire. I had 2 grenades. I'm laying with my buddy, and it was like either a shell hole or a ravine of some sort. I had 2 grenades put up on the lip of the edge there. And you know, sleep is impossible. You know, you take turns getting awake, but you know, you got one eye open, and it's just impossible. So it's pitch black that night, that morning, and I hear some noises in the brush, and the word is fire discipline. You know, don't shoot.
Don't shoot, no sparks.
If you're going to do it, use your bayonet, use your K-bar, or throw a grenade. So I heard rustling going up directly in front of me. I took one of them and just tossed it. Boom, you know, went out. And there was no more noise. I didn't see anything. But in the dead of night, when you're looking out in the jungles,
you can see
your eyes play tricks on you, and you think there's 1,000 Japs out there looking at me.
Yeah.
But there's probably nothing out there at that point. But when they came through, a lot of firing, mostly my left flank. And I had an M1 Garand, and I think I had fired 2 rounds out of the 8 that's in the clip. I had 6 rounds left. Out of nowhere, 2 Japs come out of nowhere.
They just sneak in the cover.
They crawl, and and of course they would some to my right flank too. So I started firing, and as I fired the last round, this one Jap fell to me, and I ran a bayonet through his chest. And it got stuck in there a moment. There's another one that had a big, long, like a spear with a knife or something, and came down, hit me in the helmet. I pulled a K-bar, and of course the bayonet's in this Jap's chest. I
pulled it out.
I'm sure I got him, but it happened so fast. It got caught in a rib. You know, when you hit a guy with a bayonet, you got to put some force in there. So this other one that hit me first, I caught him up around here, and then my buddy picked up and fired, and I got my weapon out and then reloaded that. And they were most of them came into my left flank. We caught some on the right. And when dawn came, they got behind our line. It took us 3 days to get them out. And that morning we looked to my left, and of course we started to move out and clean up the stragglers. And I got some photos here I brought with me. We look at them later on because it may not be a good time to do it now. But there probably were, maybe close to 3,000 that came at us that night. And they weren't really armed as adequately as they should be because they were decimated by virtue of the battle they'd just been driven back. They had small arms. There was a few tanks, swords, bayonets. Some had sticks, fists, and rocks and things like that.
The emperor.
Just a wave of humanity. Actually, it was a senseless engagement because we had automatic weapons, and the Japs didn't have many of those like we had our M1, which is a semi-auto, and they had that bolt action, Arasaka. So we outproduced, firepower with them. But when they overwhelm you like that,
they're climbing over each other.
Machine gunners, had to move their gun because they were just bodies piling up.
Yeah.
So, you think back and you revisit that sometimes. And in the years that followed, I'd wake up at night and had some problems, but in time it did dissipate. And then when it really started to leave me, the Korean War came along. So, but it's something that you do, the conditions you're given.
Now, did you have to pull anything over in Tinian? Or did
Tinian was the same thing with a lesser amount of troops to contend with, pretty much the same. The landing on Tinian was a small, narrow beach, and we got our feet wet on that one. Didn't get up onto because the area was pretty shallow, and the
LVPs couldn't get in there.
LVPs couldn't get in. There was a reef problem too, and that Saipan operation. You had to offload the LCVP into an alligator. That's a
just chug.
And you're grinding. Then it's so everything's happening at once, and the noise and you smell the cordite, and see the Japs there was a mountain on Saipan called Mount Tapachu. We call it Tapioca. You have a nickname for everything. And they had their guns on the reverse slope, registering all them guns on the landing beach.
Mm-hmm.
So we're getting, the thing is to get the hell off the beach. That's where a lot of damage is done. Once you get inland, of course, they figure they're going to come in and they're going to attack you there. But if you overwhelm them with your firepower, we had good support from the Navy, the star shells, illuminating the nighttime attacks.
Parachute shells.
And you get hit with those things, they're pretty heavy too. They come down, in a canister and like a little chute. And the Jap grenade was a small, like a small soda can, maybe half of it had a stem on it. And the ignition process was to tap it on something to start that ignition, a little rice string or something, I'm not sure. And once that started the ignition, they throw it. So if you heard a tap, on a helmet, on the back of the incoming, it's coming at you. And some of them were duds. Ours, as far as I know, supposed to be 5 seconds on our frags, but don't trust that either. You pull the pin and just
get rid of it.
Yeah. But that was pretty much the operation. Tinian, the same.
Well, how many days before the island was secured?
Saipan took about a month. We went to July on that one. Well, we're heading into for the invasion of Saipan. D-Day occurs over in Europe. So over the ship speaker comes, the invasion of Europe is on, pray for the army going in there. Mm-hmm. We say, who's going to pray for us?
Me first.
But that was a timing, I think it was June 6th or something like that. Yeah. We're en route, to the invasion. And you go into an invasion with 3-to-1 overwhelming force because you're going into a territory unmapped, so to speak. Don't know where the emplacements are. So you need more manpower, more firepower to overcome that. And the Pacific Campaign was such, and everyone pretty much the same from the mid part of that war. And of course, Okinawa, you know what that was. We did a faint landing for Okinawa, up and back, not in the battle itself. So I wasn't involved in the campaign of Okinawa, but we did a faint, one of the islands,
Iijima?
No,
Shima?
Might have been. Well, it's been so long ago that these names sort of blend into.
Oh, I know. The I's become U's.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Now, okay, after they secured the island, where did you then go? Go back to Guam?
Well, we stayed on Saipan to the end of the war. Matter of fact, when they dropped the first bomb, we were out on patrol. The Marine Corps has a policy of you just don't sit around on your sack. Either you do close order drill or you're doing some.
Yeah, paint the rocks white no matter what.
And of course, the island campaign was such that when you secure an island, all the enemy's not killed.
I know.
They're in the boondocks, in the jungles, and your mission is to every day is a patrol, night patrol, day patrol, search and destroy.
Yeah, search and destroy.
They'd be taking pot shots at us. You know, we were down on the beach with a 2-can ration, swimming in the surf, and they're shooting at us.
Oh yeah.
And one of the guys got killed. So they did a sweep. The division went out again. I think they got about maybe 75 or 80 on that one sweep. But they still were in there. And the morning we came back from that night patrol, the word was they dropped this bomb in Japan that destroyed the whole city. That's crazy. No such bomb going on. Didn't just
you were
dismissed
smoking
it.
something.
And then the second one was dropped, and in fact, then they did surrender. So of course, thank God for that, because I seen the maps of the invasion in November of that year, and the one that followed in the spring. And the 2nd Marine Division mission was to go into, I think it was it Honshu or the first island they were going to hit, and go so far inland, and that was it, because they figured there'd be so many casualties. And the intelligence was wrong on that thing, because when after the war ended, they discovered instead of being 3 Jap divisions, there was 8 that we'd face in that battle. So it was.
The G2 wasn't too smart.
Well, you know, a lot of guessing.
A lot of it's guessment.
Yeah.
Pure guess.
Yeah, it is. It's just an educated guess, so to speak, and oftentimes they fall like the Korean thing. You know, the Chinese coming over that border. So you have a shortfall on intelligence that can be devastating at times, but in this case, the atomic bomb that saved lives, both Japanese and American.
I'd like to touch briefly when you were detached to Guam on the war crimes, if you would. Just a little bit of that, because we're running out of time.
Okay, well, when the war ended, a lot of the things that the Japanese did were revealed by virtue of the people who they imprisoned, turned on them. And the one in particular, I was detached for the War Crimes Tribunal on Guam. That had to do with the atrocities committed by the Japanese on Wake Island, on Chichijima, and some of the other islands, I think, even going out to the Philippines. But my sector, I was NCO in charge of a sector in charge of mostly the Chichijima atrocities. And what the Chichijima Japs did was our flyers that was a communications center for the Japanese military. And the carrier planes that come over, they would strafe it and bomb it. And of course, with a dive bomber is going straight into fire, you know, that's a pretty risky thing. They get shot down. They were captured, brought onto the island. They were tortured.
And mutilated.
Beheaded.
Yeah.
And in several cases, this one Navy flyer, they cut him up, cut his thighs out, and hung it up on a wire like you would cure a deer and served it in the mess hall. Took their liver and cut it up little pieces, served it on bamboo splints in the officers' mess. And the commanding general of that island operation was a guy named Tachibana. They hung these guys. I was there for a short time, but not present when they actually hung them, because the trial commenced. It took maybe a month to proceed. They had brought in 2 Jap lawyers from mainland Japan with the JAGs, the Navy guys, to run their defense. They gave them, introduced the evidence, rendered a verdict, made a sentence, death by hanging. To hang a Jap is a disgrace.
Oh, yeah.
Because they would have rather be shot with the firing squad. That was their whole psyche, to be a place of honor. But what they did to those Chichijima flyers, the American flyers, I think there was 8 of them. And there's a book out there that alludes to that called Fly Boys by Bradley, who was the son of the Iwo Jima flag raiser, the Navy corpsman who did that. But there's a better book called Sorties into Hell, which more refines what I'm alluding to.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get a chance to read that book, it's pretty factual. I was there, listened to the testimony, and these Japs are under my control, under my guardianship, so to speak.
You were the puppet.
We got them in. The Seabees again built quonset huts to hold them as cells. So we secured them there.
Mm-hmm.
That's where they were secured.
We're going to be running out of time. I'd like to show a couple of these shots, then get back to this little bag here. I think the camera. This is a young friend many, many years ago. Okay? Let me know when you're there. And then, talking about battle flags, this is a little history. I'd like Bernie to give you an idea of what's on that flag. It's very active.
Quite a story. This flag was taken in the Battle of Saipan, and on the writings on the Jap flag, with their activities in their run through China. And this particular unit, the unit that we engaged on Saipan and the Marianas, was actually in China back in the 30s, that committed all those atrocities to the Chinese, rape, plunder, beheadings, and so on. It's a Navajo Indian, a code talker, which a whole other story about that segment of our Marine operation, and of course myself, some of my souvenirs that I have to this day.
Okay. And we got to get our war straight. This is you, I believe, over in Korea.
That's the Korean War, yeah.
Kind of wrinkled uniform.
Well, I wasn't ready for inspection.
Amen.
Not quite.
Okay, and to talk about inspection, this is a more recent one of Bernie. It was a Manchester Town Hall.
No, that's Poughkeepsie, New York.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Oh, we didn't even touch there.
I'm a New Yorker. You know,
Okay, all right.
by birth.
All right.
Yeah.
And that what was that car again?
It's a Fiat, 1918 Fiat, which had had no fuel pump.
Gravity system.
And it had to be gravity fed, and we'd come up to a hill and have to back up. And we rode around that recruiting. I came out of Korea before I was discharged, finally from the Marine Corps, as a recruiter back in New York State.
Okay, now this is one that I think is tremendous. There's a couple of lines I'd like to put over here. Young or old, once a Marine, always a Marine. And this is our young friend here. And the good thing about it, the uniform still fit him. Now that, I think, is highly commendable regardless of what other things you did.
Stroke of dumb luck.
Hey, no, you ate well and well.
Oh, yeah.
Now, in back of us, I'd like you to run through your fruit salad if you can. Any citations outstanding? What does all of this represent?
Well, this is the rank I held, the final rank as gunnery sergeant. And the hash marks indicate 4 years for each hash. As I said before, we did 4 years regular, and then
Reserve.
8 years as reservist, and then 2 shooting wars. In Korea, I was with the 1st Marine Division. In World War II, the 2nd Marine Division. And these are some of the medals I have. I got a couple of Purple Hearts. That's a good conduct. That's the American theater. These are theater ribbons that are given to those who served a specific time in the theater of operations. World War II victory, the occupation medal, national defense. That's the Korean combat in the Busan perimeter. And these are all awards from the United Nations. The Korea operations have to do with that phase of my career in the Marine Corps. These ribbons are some of those that are part of the display here. And of course, the shooting badges here, expert rifleman. That's a picture that was shown a little while ago.
The younger guy.
Yeah. And this frame was made by a gentleman in the Army who, we were talking about that before, Bob, that my adopted son, a Marine today, was over in Iraq a while back, and they would have casualties, and this gentleman in the Army got to know him and said, I'd like to make a shadow box for all your Marines who were killed, which he did. And of course, my adopted son said, well, how about making one for my dad? And he said, yeah, well. So he called me on the phone and endorsed it in the back. And he made this for me, and it's quite an honor to have that. I really enjoy that.
Amen. It's a lot of history there, buddy.
Yeah, 12 years of a little sweat.
Yeah, and they don't just hand them out. We got about 1 minute left to go. I'd like to ask you one question.
Yep.
Based upon what we've seen here, what we know is happening, and what you said, has this service life been positive or negative as far as how you conducted yourself from there on out?
Well, it's positive, and I'll tell you why. Being a Marine is not just a job or a career, profession, or a way of life. It's a way of life.
Yeah.
Basically, a code of conduct, code of ethics, system of values. I've taken that. I took the playbook when I left the Corps, and I applied that
to life,
to my life. Yeah. And I got in this position here today where I'm at peace, comfortable.
Press the fresh, buddy. Thank you for your service and for the work here.
Thank you, too, for your service.
This has been great.
Thanks, Bob. Nice to be with you.
Amen. That's a wrap, folks. Come and see us if you will. The address is on the back coming at you. Thank you for listening.